Real questions, real answers for real life. Come on in and pull up a chair. You're at 1850 Main Street with Michael Del Giorno and David Zanotti.
Have Democrats really found a way to control the way elections turn out? And are we paying for it?
So this is an amazing article. I'm looking at this thing, and even the picture of it is fascinating. How taxpayers will heavily subsidize Democrat boots on the ground this election. Dated April 12, 2024 by a gentleman named Ben Weingarten, and it's in the Daily Signal. Now, Daily Signal is the online publication of the Heritage Foundation. So this is kind of coming from, I guess, one of the top-tiered conservative think tanks in Washington, D.C., and it sort of mashes together a whole bunch of reports. And I wanted to talk with you, Rob, because of your involvement, most particularly in iVoters and in elections, in the American Election Institute, in iVoters.com, in just all the years now that you've spent. Now we've got a couple of decades spent on the ground.
Hard to believe. A couple of decades.
In regards to elections. And talk for just a couple of minutes about election laws and all this confusion. Now, as a matter of background, let's kind of get on the table the fact that the elections going all the way back to 2000 in this country, for 24 years, we've been having an ongoing debate about how close elections are, and have there been tricks or problems or elections being rigged or somehow stolen or somehow cheated upon, whatever terms you want to use. For 24 years, this has been going on. And at the same time, from 2003 forward, which would be 21 years, there's been an organization that was founded in America called the Center for American Progress. It was founded in 2003 by John Podesta and George Soros. And I'm not making this up because everybody now knows George Soros' name, which is kind of funny because he's the international financier behind it. But the person on the ground who actually served in the Clinton administration as chief of staff and then served in the Obama administration, then ran Hillary Clinton's campaign, and now serves again in the White House as almost chief of staff for Joe Biden. John Podesta, a person who we affectionately laugh about, saying he may actually be the longest figurative president of the United States in history, because he's been guiding, directing, or controlling how many administrations and campaigns year after year. He now has more than decades going back in the White House. Now, when that organization got founded, Center for American Progress, they also founded a 501c4 action organization as well. And that organization has been the ringleader for both political thought, sort of like the Anti-Heritage Foundation, the Left Heritage Foundation, but also a tremendous ringleader in regards to creating funding and funding mechanisms across the country directed toward controlling the outcome of elections. Now, the amazing thing about this, I know I've used that word probably a dozen times already. The amazing thing about this, to add one more, is that nobody talks about them. So, I mean, you were not in the field of public policy. Growing up, and I mean, how many people do you think have ever heard in their lifetimes of Center for American Progress?
Very few, unless they're listeners to the public square in 1850 Main Street, because we do our job of talking about what they've done and what they continually try and do in the world of elections over the years. And when you study them as close as we've studied them, it's really hard to believe that all this is happening and no one's talking more about it.
So they're the ringleaders. So let's put that one there. So if you want to do follow-up on this and you want to look further into it, what we have to do is go to Center for American Progress, and there's lots of ways to track their stories. So Heritage Foundation comes out with a story that starts with an old article, an article that came out a couple of years ago called The Shadow Campaign to Save the Democracy. And right after Joe Biden's election, Time magazine came out with a very lengthy piece. I mean, it was long. And they basically outlined how a number of organizations hubbed around key union leaders and consulting figures and different political activists around the country had put together a network of groups and organizations that were highly funded to go out and bring in enough votes to make absolutely certain that Joe Biden would be elected and Donald Trump would be defeated. And what they did was they took advantage of every single way to bend rules or fill out blanks or get their toes on the edge or over the edge of the law, and to manipulate every circumstance, including the entire COVID mess and all the elections and election laws that were changed during COVID, to make absolutely certain in key swing states that Joe Biden had enough votes. And they considered their effort extraordinarily noble and that it saved democracy because it defeated Donald Trump. So this then, and they published this, and they named the names of the people who were leaders and all they'd done. This kind of goes back to the whole Stacey Abrams reality.
Yes.
And how much money went flying into Georgia from all over the world to fund Stacey Abrams and her turnout model of votes, because they knew if they could flip Georgia from the Republican side of the Electoral College to the Democrat side, that in essence, Donald Trump could not be reelected. And so they went through all the ways that they could flip the Trump victory of 2016, and they succeeded. So they put out all this story about their strategies. What's interesting is, if you study the article, you'll never find the names of Soros or Podesta. What you'll find is all these other people who fronted for them. So it's kind of like a cover document.
It is.
It's like, here's our fall guys.
And here are the pieces on the chessboard, but you'll never know who the chess master are or is.
Exactly.
Especially when it comes to those individuals. But you mentioned Podesta. I mean, has anyone outside of a president spent more time on Pennsylvania Avenue over the last 25 years than John Podesta? So his fingerprints are all over each and every one of these things. And each time it talks about, you talked about getting up to the line, getting to the edge when it comes to the voting process. Is there anyone in America that believes that those who have the legal right to vote should not be permitted that legal right to vote? Is there disagreement there? Because I think that's where some of the confusion comes in, is when you read the things that Podesta's team puts out and Soros's team put out, they act like that people are objecting to those that have the legal right to vote, to voting. And I haven't heard one person say they shouldn't be allowed to vote.
Yeah, there's constantly a preaching and an avocation that Republicans are for voter suppression. Now, as a nonprofit organization, we encourage everybody to vote. And we have done, over the years, we've done voter registration information. We've encouraged people to learn how to register voters and get people involved in the process. And we do iVoters.com, which is a nonprofit voter information service that's designed to give anyone who asks for the information online full access to all the material to learn more so they can vote with confidence on where candidates stand on the issues. We are big fans of voting. All right, and we think America's better when if everyone who's entitled to vote was voting, America would be a better place, because everyone would have a sense of skin in the game. Everyone would be participating in the process. So we believe in participatory, representative democracy. All right, we don't believe in flat-out democracy. That neither did the founders who put this country together, and most people can't define what democracy is anyhow. But we are very much a believer in people participating in this representative republic that operates with the principle of democratic participation. We're all fine with that. Not a big deal. All right, we get that.
And there need to be rules in place to protect the integrity of that, just like there are rules in place in every facet of society.
And I want to say this, we get further and further into this conversation, so we're talking about it several times this week, that we recognize that everyone has the right to participate in this process. Okay, that's not a problem. We are not for more restrictions on nonprofit organizations. We are not calling for new laws to be passed that prohibit people operating in the nonprofit sector, operating in the realm of good citizenship, operating in the realm of free speech. We're not for that stuff. We don't want more regulations. What we're trying to do right from the start is to expose one of the most effective strategies that control the outcome of elections that we've ever seen, that seldom gets talked about anywhere. And finally, Heritage Foundation has come out and started to put these pieces together.
Thanks for stopping by at 1850 Main Street. We're glad you're here. Do you want to learn more about what is really going on behind the scenes in public policy? Tune in to the Public Square on over 200 radio stations coast to coast. Or download the free Public Square mobile app from your app store. Just look for the lamppost. Find out what America is really talking about at thepublicsquare.com.
Let's roll back the clock just a second and show you how this works. It was 2018, Stacey Abrams ran for governor in Georgia and was defeated. She became an instant election denier and said that she did not lose the election, that the election was stolen from her, and she never changed her story to this very day. She does not in any way admit that the 2018 election was lost. No one has ever in any way condemned her for holding that position. No one in the media. All right. So Stacey Abrams, after losing that battle, was conscripted into the services of or hired or invited or whatever term you want to use, was placed on the board of the Center for American Progress Action. And she served on that board with Ron Klain, who happens to have been the most recent chief of staff of the Biden administration. So before Biden's elected, Stacey Abrams is recruited and she's placed on the board of the Center for American Progress Action, which is their C4. Then, along with a number of very influential people who are around the circle and contributors to John Podesta and Center for American Progress, Stacey Abrams is placed in charge of the election process for the Center for American Progress and the radical left in Georgia to defeat Donald Trump, and then is funneled, heaven knows how many millions of dollars. There's reports of at least $50 million that went in for her voter registration operations in that year. There are reports that Silicon Valley money exceeded $150 million that went into that region. She is given a boatload of money and successfully works in 5 counties to flip the numbers in the 2020 election for the defeat of Donald Trump, and then the election of 2 additional U.S. senators. Incredibly successful campaign, all funded and put into place. And that was done through Podesta, through the Center for American Progress, and through their donors, who basically all work together. And if it wasn't done through and by them, then it's just an amazing coincidence that Stacey Abrams was on their board, along with Ron Klain, who then became Biden's chief of staff. So it's just like, all you got to do is enough internet search and you see all this thing, you see where the money comes from, you see the people, you see the foundations. There it is.
Well, there's something there that I do want to ask about and circle back to, because what Stacey Abrams was able to do with all that money, and again, tens of millions of dollars, we probably don't even know how much, as you alluded to, with Silicon Valley. But did that also have the perfect storm scenario in the sense of it was a COVID year? And what happened to voter and election laws in states during that time?
Sure, like Georgia, Pennsylvania, Ohio, and other key states, yeah. So what ended up happening, of course, was that since the rules were being changed by governors, by boards of elections, and not by state legislatures to facilitate changing the way people could vote, and in essence, emphasizing one methodology over another, or even changing laws. In some cases, in the case of Ohio, changing election dates based upon the whims of a governor. We ended up in a situation where, for the first time, 50% of the vote that happened in the federal elections in key states like Georgia, 50% of the vote came in by mail or by early voting. Now, early voting's been with us for a while. as has mail-in voting, but it's never reached the level where 50% or more of it came in early. That was the platform from which these organizations were able to operate, oftentimes with nonprofit dollars, to go out and specifically recruit voter registration and voter turnout efforts in areas that were distinctly targeted based upon the predisposition of the people living in those areas and how they would vote in support of Democrat candidates. See, one of the things that nonprofits are not permitted to do, according to IRS regulations, is to target an audience in such a way that that targeted audience will net in impacting the outcome of an election, because, and these IRS rulings are not in stone. You have to read through lots of them to get to the directives on it. But there are organizations, particularly on the conservative side of things, who've had their tax-exempt status revoked because they were accused of targeting.
Yeah, not only revoked, but even if that status isn't revoked, the IRS has the ability to make an organization's life miserable by putting you through the process of questioning what you're doing and you having to defend it. And you know that far too well.
Yeah, we've been through that experience. And to show you how radically different the IRS has changed in this, many years ago, because we do a voter information project and we have done publications in the past, we did a publication, a nonpartisan publication that covered a whole bunch of federal races from both sides. And we were actually in a position of IRS at the American Policy Roundtable. We were in a position of IRS revocation. Our tax-exempt status was revoked because the IRS viewed that we had placed the candidacy and the information. All right, on one page, we had George Bush and we had Al Gore. And we had the same identical sets of information and access on those two candidates. But because we placed George Bush above Al Gore on the page, all right, it's 8.5 by 11. All right, whether you put them side by side or top and bottom, they accused us of bias in the publication because Bush was placed above Gore on the geographical positioning on a piece of paper. And they accused us of bias and revoked our tax-exempt status, and we had to go the whole way to Washington, D.C., the whole way through trials to get it back again. That's because we're a conservative organization. Look, fast forward now to what we just talked about with Stacey Abrams and her nonprofits and the Center for American Progress. And there are many, many more we're about to get into as well. Look at how subjective all of this enforcement really comes out to be. All right, so stage one in the argument is the article. The article is how taxpayers will heavily subsidize Democrat boots on the ground this election. Okay, now, just with that as a background, we're going to go next into a story that it's actually, you got to put your seatbelt on. It's going to be hard to believe. But we're out of coffee, so we've got to do that on the next episode of 1850.
The conversations are just getting started. To get connected, check out 1850mainstreet.com. And if you want more, check out Your Morning Show and The Public Square. Your Morning Show is where you can hear Michael and David talking about the stories of the day every day. And you can learn more about what's really going on behind the scenes in public policy at The Public Square. You can listen to Your Morning Show and The Public Square on the iHeart mobile app and on radio stations across the country. Subscribe today so you don't miss a single conversation. We'll see you next time here at 1850 Main Street.